If you ever wanted a weekend of Big Ten and college football to deliver, that is exactly what Week 11 was. One of the best Saturdays that we have seen in this sport and in this conference in quite some time. As we say hello and welcome to the Week 11 postgame show right here on Big Ten Breakdown. I am Ben Stevens. Of course, all of this a part of the I-80 Club. Make sure you are liking, you are following, you are subscribing wherever you get your favorite shows in podcast and audio form. That's Apple, that's Spotify, etc. Visual form, I hope you are watching on YouTube and following all along the socials. And if you want all of this great content, not just Big Ten Breakdown, but everything the I-80 Club is putting out, you can get all of that ad-free at patreon.com/I-80 Club. That's I-80 Club. Week 11 delivered with some of the best football games, instant classic type finishes, and games decided in the final few minutes. We saw history in certain spots. We saw wins we have never seen in certain situations or in certain stadiums. And we saw teams still having belief late in the month of November, even if the 2025 season had not gone the way anybody might have anticipated. And we saw some of the great theatrics and heroics in this sport for some of the best teams in the country, delivering that way on Saturday. So, of course, each and every post-game show, we recap the best things that we saw from the weekend that was. The four distinct honors and our four down honors. And we start with the best and brightest from the Big Ten weekend in week number 11. First down goes to Omar Cooper. First down goes to Omar Cooper Jr. and his body control in the air. In the toe tap touchdown that will be remembered in Bloomington, Indiana, in Big Ten football, and frankly, all of college football for a very long time. A picture, a still frame, and a catch that is probably being hung up at Upstairs Bar on Kirkwood as we speak. As Omar Cooper Jr. delivers the game-winning touchdown catch and the game-winning touchdown throw from Fernando Mendoza. As Indiana stays perfect and improves to 10-0 for a second consecutive year with a wild victory, 27-24 in State College against Penn State. Again, as this game played out, it was wild. It was chaotic. It deserved a cinematic finish, and that is what Omar Cooper provided. With 36 seconds left on 3rd and goal from the 7, Fernando Mendoza in some heat, jumps, gets absolutely smacked as he delivers a ball up in the air that only his wideout in Cooper can go up and make a play. And somehow it looked as though Zachy Wheatley, who was guarding Cooper incredibly tight and as you would see in a textbook, is trying to shove Cooper out of the back of the end zone. Somehow, some way, Cooper's right foot does not come down on the white paint of the out of bounds margin, and his left foot taps in the green in the back of the end zone inside Beaver Stadium. Again, Indiana winning 27-24 with one of the greatest catches in one of the most important spots to win a game that you will ever see in one of the best games of this 2025 season and in a long time in Big Ten football. 10-0 for Indiana for a second consecutive year. 10 wins in a season for the second time for IU in 127 years of Hoosiers football history. Of course, you can add it to the long list of firsts and historic accomplishments for Curt Cignetti. Another that you can add is winning in-state college for the first time in 14 tries. Indiana wins their first ever road game inside Beaver Stadium against Penn State. Just the third ever win in 26 all-time matchups against Penn State. So let's talk about that final drive in the grab for Omar Cooper that has earned first down honors. It wasn't smooth sailing. Indiana got the football back on its own 20-yard line following a punt. Under 2 minutes remaining, 1:51 to be exact. And on the very first play, Mendoza in the second half, under constant duress from a Penn State D-line with NFL caliber talent denied that a Sutton Zane Durant that was starting to look like the Penn State defensive front we expected. Mendoza was sacked by Zane Durant on first down. So now, 2nd and 17 from IU's own 13-yard line as the time was ticking close to 90 seconds remaining in regulation. How does Mendoza answer? A 22-yard strike. To who? Omar Cooper Jr. On that final game-winning possession for Indiana, Mendoza was 5 of 9 for 87 yards in the 7-yard touchdown pass to Omar Cooper. Again, the catch, phenomenal, historic, remembered forever. Again, one of the craziest elements of body control in getting a foot or a toe, left foot down to keep Indiana undefeated. But the throw from Mendoza was beautiful. Again, under pressure. He stayed in there to the last instant to deliver the ball to his wide receiver in Cooper, the only place he could go up and get it. And we have seen Fernando Mendoza bounce back from adversity numerous times in 3 critical road victories for the Hoosiers in games and in spots and in stadiums. Frankly, Indiana football until the Curt Cignetti era would never even dream of coming away with a victory. In the 3 road wins for IU this year, at Iowa, at Oregon, and now at Penn State, Fernando Mendoza has thrown a critical 4th quarter interception. That's not good by any means. I am not highlighting that as a positive, but the positive is the response. As many people, quarterbacks, and teams wilt after making a crucial mistake late, Fernando Mendoza and Indiana have done the exact opposite. Not something you would think for a program that entered this season losing more games than any in the history of college football. So when Mendoza threw the 4th quarter pick here against the Nittany Lions that led to the go-ahead touchdown for Penn State, you thought, all right, that's it. Here's the end of the unbeaten road for IU in the 2025 season. But once again, for a 3rd time this year, in very difficult environments, I know Penn State is a 3-6 football team, and I can tell you about the NFL caliber talent in the 1st round draft picks that they have, especially on the defensive side of the ball. It doesn't matter. But when there is belief in a spot, you can see it echo all around Beaver Stadium in one of the great environments in college football. The atmosphere was still very much that on Saturday afternoon. So for Mendoza to throw the interception and bounce back to throw the game-winning touchdown, something he has now done in 3 road games this year for IU when his team has either been tied or, in this instance, in-state college trailing, to throw the game-winning touchdown toss, again, speaks to his resilience. It speaks to the relentless nature for Curt Cignetti, who said after the game, looking rather emotional, which is not something we have often seen Cignetti in Bloomington look like. He's seen some crazy things in his career. Never something quite like that. Incredibly improbable is how the head coach for the Hoosiers deemed that victory. But they don't quit, right? Refuse to lose. Is that mentality instilled? The belief and the confidence in this program that even when things seem dire and many college kids would be like, you know what, just wasn't our day on the road, Indiana finds a way to prevail. Because frankly, Indiana played terribly in the second half until that final offensive possession. Indiana was making mistakes and having mental lapses we have not often seen for the Hoosiers, especially booked as a favorite in the 2 years for Curt Cignetti at the helm in Bloomington. IU led 20-7 with 8:41 remaining in that 3rd quarter. And it seemed as though that lead that was nearly 2 touchdowns could have been well more than that. A couple of failed red zone trips and not punching it in for a touchdown and having to settle for a Niko Radicic field goal. And then Indiana kind of squandered those games, allowed Penn State to play a game we had not seen out of the Nittany Lions in some time, and yet fought their way back. Again, I am not arguing that was the version of 2025 Penn State we all expected to see. They're not a good football team despite the talent on the roster. It is not a great win resume-wise for Indiana, but it's a win they had to have and a loss that would have been a bad blemish that they do not have to worry about because of Omar Cooper Jr. and why he earns 1st down honors for IU. Now Indiana, perfect at 10-0. Again, 127 years of Indiana football history, 2 seasons of 10 or more wins. 2024 and 2025 is remarkable. It's almost like we're taking it for granted how much history a program can stack up in such a quick amount of time. Indiana this upcoming weekend will have Wisconsin in Bloomington, 30.5-point favorite against the Badgers, then a bye, then the bucket game on the road in West Lafayette against Purdue. Indiana more than likely is going to be undefeated at 12-0, entering a Big Ten championship game more than likely against an Ohio State team we will talk about in just a matter of moments. Quickly here, in our 4-down honors, we often highlight and celebrate the positive, but we're just going to quickly reflect on what seemingly was going to be an incredibly positive day for Terry Smith and Penn State, making that Valley rather happy once again. The Nittany Lions now winless again, 0-6 in Big Ten play, but finally, we have said it often, there was going to be a game this year that Penn State, with all of the talent on that roster, things would start to break their way, and they would look like the team that we expected way back in the preseason, even with the injury at the quarterback spot to Drew Aller and Ethan Grunkemeyer taking over. On Saturday, they had that spark. They had that ferocious nature defensively, and Nick Singleton had his best game of the year, 3 total touchdowns. They held Indiana, what had become quite a lethal rushing attack for the Hoosiers, to only 3.5 yards per carry. They had 3 sacks against Fernando Mendoza. Indiana had allowed just 7 sacks in total in their first 9 games of the year. Penn State got to them, denied Dennis Sutton, Zane Durant, and others. Amari Campbell in the backfield often for that Jim Knowles defense. It was finally the defense we thought Penn State was going to put out there on the field this year. But ultimately, it's 0-6 in Big Ten play. Land-Grant Trophy time in East Lansing coming up this upcoming Saturday for Penn State. I do think they are going to win at least one, if not a few, Big Ten games down the stretch if they can continue to have that mentality in belief. Was that their final stand? I don't think so. It will be really cool for Terry Smith, a man that has dedicated his life to Penn State football, to finally get that win as the interim head coach. But Indiana remains unblemished because of one of the greatest catches in one of the biggest spots that you will ever see to win a football game in Big Ten Conference history or college football history, Omar Cooper Jr. We mentioned how Indiana, excuse me here as I take a sip of water. We mentioned how Indiana has 2 more games on the docket this upcoming Saturday back in Memorial Stadium at the Rock in Bloomington, hosting Wisconsin, 30.5-point spread. Well, how about those Badgers? Wisconsin earning 2nd down honors in Week 11 as Wisconsin wins its first Big Ten game of the year to snap the 6-game losing skid, their first Big Ten victory since October of 2024, their first Big Ten home win inside Camp Randall since October 5th, 2024, with an outright upset as a double-digit underdog against number 23 at the time, Washington, 13-10 in one of the best Big Ten football games that you will ever see. For Wisconsin to win that type of game, a game in which the Badgers' leading passer was their punter, Sean West, who had a great pass on a fake punt to convert on a trick play and had 24 yards. The Badgers beat a ranked opponent for the first time since 2021, for the first time in the Luke Fickell era, where their punter was the leading passer. Now, if that's not Big Ten football to a T, with all of the stereotypes and narratives you can say about this league, then I'm not so sure what it is. But outside of that comical nature, I thought Saturday meant a lot in the evening hours in Camp Randall. Again, one of the great venues in this conference, one of the great atmospheres in this sport when things are going well. But it had not been a great season by any means in Madison. And yet, with Wisconsin in that football game, with Wisconsin battling with a 4th quarter lead over the Huskies, you started to feel Camp Randall seem as though it normally is. When jump around hit in the 4th quarter, you could feel it reverberate, and you could feel that energy start to build for Luke Fickell, for his staff, for his team, the players on the turf, and everybody else in the stands at Camp Randall, with a wintry mix going on as well. Very much a Big Ten football game in the month of November. And to get that result, to get that outcome, just a few days after we got the confirmation from Wisconsin Athletic Director Chris McIntosh that Luke Fickell would in fact be back for 2026, it's a small building block. It's not necessarily a changing of the guard or a new era. There is still so much to figure out for Fickell entering year number 4, but it's a small bit of confidence. And you could see after the stop that Mason Posa, the true freshman linebacker who is outstanding and was outstanding against the Huskies on Saturday, you could start to see that response and that resilience from the Badgers, because on that fourth down stop, when Damon Williams Jr. near midfield was trying to break away for a first down that would have kept Washington in the game down by only a field goal, and Mason Posa was there for his second sack. He had 2.5 sacks, in fact, for his second full sack of the game to make the huge defensive play. You saw the celebration on the Badgers sideline. You saw players, you saw staff members under Fickell come up to their head coach and celebrate like they had just won a Big Ten championship. Not just because they beat Washington and they finally won a conference game, but basically to say, we got you and we're still in this fight. And all the reporting around Madison, despite myself, many others, local, national, otherwise, questioning and trying to understand why Luke Fickell is coming back in 2026. The one thing that we could not really question, and now you have no reason to doubt whatsoever, was that those within the program in Madison, the Badgers staff, the Badgers players, and of course, the athletic department and his bosses have full belief in Luke Fickell to figure this thing out. And you saw that buy-in from the Badgers on Saturday evening. Again, for Wisconsin to win a game against a ranked foe, for the first ranked win under Luke Fickell, the first one-score victory for this program since November 2023, the first ranked win for Wisconsin, snapping an 11-game skid since 2021. To do that when your punter, Sean West, who might be the best player all year, or the best athlete at least for the Badgers all year, is your leading passer with 24 yards. It's insane. One of the reasons he was the leading passer, Danny O'Neal got the start, had to be carted off in the first half. Another tough blow in terms of bad injury luck at the QB spot that has also defined the 3 years under Luke Fickell. Carter Smith, the 4-star true freshman from Fort Myers, finally came in. Badgers fans were happy despite the injury to Danny O'Neal. He brought some moxie. He brought some physicality in running the football. He was not exactly throwing the football with great success. 3 of 12 in his debut for only 8 yards, but 15 carries, 47 yards, and a touchdown. And I had said this a few times here on the show, that with how bad Wisconsin's offense has been this year, the defense really wasn't playing that poorly. Mike Tressel's group was not an abomination. They were giving up some points. They were breaking a little bit just because of all of the time they were on the turf, all of the onus and pressure on that unit, on that side of the football. But they were playing with some fight, and they played lights out against Damon Williams Jr. in Washington on Saturday. They forced 2 turnovers, the strip sack by Mason Posa of Damon Williams midway through the third quarter, leading to the go-ahead and only touchdown in the game for Carter Smith on the ground. There is what you can see. And I mentioned how critical Mason Posa was, making the stop against Damon Williams Jr. that sealed the first win for Wisconsin in Big Ten play. He had 11 tackles, 2.5 sacks in the game-winning stop. How about Cooper Catalano, his fellow freshman defensive star? 19 tackles for Wisconsin on Saturday, 12 of them solo. So when you have those 2 defensive leaders that have been fully bought in and advocated for Luke Fickell, and you have Mason Posa strip sacking Damon Williams, the turnover that led to Wisconsin's only touchdown that turned out to be the game winner in Carter Smith with some physicality bringing it across the goal line. If you needed just a small sliver of hope in Madison, I think you saw that exemplified on Saturday. Again, in the 4-down honors category, we highlight and celebrate the positive. But just quickly here on the other UW, in a battle for UW, Washington, now 2-7 outright, 1-8 against the spread away from Seattle under Jedd Fisch. That's bad, man. And in the 2 games this year, when they have been booked as a road favorite, they have not covered, despite the dramatic comeback in College Park against Maryland, and of course, as a 10.5-point road favorite in Madison on Saturday. I told you the line stood out to me like the stanky fish that it turned out to be for the Badgers to pull off the outright upset. And there's a lot of concern for Washington when it comes to playing away from Husky Stadium. Not a good look for the Huskies, a great look and a great result for the Badgers, in one that was much needed. Because we said, if you are going to have the confidence in Luke Fickell to utter that statement entering Wisconsin's final month of the regular season in their last 4 games with a 2-6 football team, when they were more than likely going to be a double-digit underdog in every single game, you had to have something to hang the hat on, at least for a long offseason ahead of year number 4 in Madison. Luke Fickell delivered one of those moments on Saturday for the Badgers. Third down honors, speaking of instant classics coming down to the final few minutes in a Big Ten November football game. Third down honors go to the idea that Ducks love water, as Oregon wins an instant classic in Iowa City inside Kinnick Stadium in an all-time Big Ten football game. In the cold and in the wet, Oregon showed that they are ready to master any type of football that you are going to throw at them, even big boy Big Ten football on the road in November in less than ideal conditions. Oregon wins 18-16 on a 39-yard winning game, on a 39-yard game-winning field goal with only 3 ticks remaining in regulation from the Ducks kicker in Atticus Sappington, who, by the way, in the wet and sloppy conditions, not a ton of wind, but still wet and sloppy, he was a perfect 3 of 3 on his field goal tries on Saturday. Again, an instant classic, as was Omar Cooper Jr. in the touchdown grab against Penn State, as was Wisconsin making significant defensive plays to get their first Big Ten win in over a calendar year. It was an instant classic in Kinnick Stadium with its implications and ramifications for the Big Ten in a college football playoff race. Oregon, in that football game, making the plays when it mattered. We'll talk about that in just a matter of moments because they also did not make the mistakes. Iowa scored the go-ahead touchdown with $1:51 remaining in the fourth quarter. Mark Gronowski scored that go-ahead touchdown on 4th and goal, his 12th rushing score of the year, now an Iowa program record by himself for the most rushing touchdowns for a quarterback in Hawkeyes football history. It was a lengthy drive that allowed Iowa to do that. I believe 90-plus yards to hit Pater, 93 yards to be exact. And they scored what felt like finally the touchdown that would finally snap their 11-game skid, finally beating a ranked opponent. The 2-point try was batted up in the air. Kamari Moulton tried to catch the deflection, but was out of bounds when the ball hit his hands, so just a 1-point game. Oregon responded right away. 10-play, 54-yard drive, including one of the best throws you will ever see out of a college quarterback, an absolute 24-yard dot, dime, thread the needle, however you want to describe it. Perfection would be the word I use, from Dante Moore to Malik Benson with only 23 seconds left. TJ Hall, the outstanding Iowa corner, was in perfect position and perfect guarding of Malik Benson in man coverage on the outside, riding that the entire way. The ball was just put in an indefensible spot by Dante Moore. Again, one of the best passes you will ever see because of the moment, the situation, and the precision necessary in those conditions to put it on an absolute spot where only his guy, Malik Benson, could make the play. It sucked the air out of the stadium. It set Oregon up for the game-winning field goal that Atticus Sappington drilled from 39 yards out. Again, I'm not necessarily surprised by the outcome. I told you here on the Week 11 pregame show that I thought it would be a one-possession game. Heck, I thought it could be decided by a field goal or fewer. But I believed in Oregon, ready for the task of playing an ugly, murky, sloppy Big Ten football game and being just as ready, if not even more, to excel in that environment than that of Iowa. For all of the reasons that many people picked the Hawkeyes to win that game outright as a 6-point home underdog, because of their discipline, because of their physicality up front, it was Oregon that did a better job than Iowa in Kinnick Stadium of excelling in those areas. It was the Hawkeyes that made the mistakes. A bad snap on a punt in the first quarter that led to a safety. Nowhere close to Reese Dakin as he was trying to corral that snap. Led to a safety, a 2-point advantage for Oregon, who won the game 18-16 by 2. It was a fumble late in the third quarter from Caden Weegan as Iowa was putting together one of their better offensive possessions of the game inside the Ducks' 20-yard line on a play that could not happen. Led to an Atticus Sappington field goal, again, widening that margin. People questioned if Oregon would be ready for Iowa to suck them into the dirty water of a Hawkeyes all-time classic Big Ten football game. And I think the Ducks once again answered the bell. Not for the first time, once again, mind you. Dan Lanning is a madman. He understands what it takes to be successful in this conference. He wore a cotton sweatshirt on the sideline for the second consecutive rain game for Oregon, as he did in the underwhelming performance in Autzen against Wisconsin. Why? Because he wants it to be fun to be in the rain. He wants it to be difficult, and he wants to share how difficult it can be alongside his team. A madman. And I know not wearing a raincoat doesn't necessarily set you up for a ton of success, and that's the difference maker. But that is what Dan Lanning has built in Eugene for this Oregon program, and we saw it exemplified. They were ready to play Big Ten football, and they didn't just play it. They succeeded in doing so. 261 rushing yards on 36 carries as a team. 7.3 yards per pop against one of the better defenses that you will see for Iowa, and held the Hawks on the other side to just 101 rushing yards as a team, only 2.3 yards per carry. Could Oregon match that intensity and physicality? The answer, a resounding yes. And Oregon did so despite some rumors that turned out to be true, that guys like Decordian Moore, Kenyon Sadiq, even Gary Bryant in the game were not going to play. Alex Harkey on the right side of the offensive line, he, Sadiq, and Decordian Moore all out for the game, and you lose Gary Bryant early in the first half, and you still prevail. For Iowa, it's another bitter pill to swallow. It's not a bad loss by any means, but you were set up once again at home against a ranked foe to finally win a hugely significant game. And this felt like the biggest game in November that the Hawks had seen in damn near a decade, if not longer than that. And they had the opportunity. They had the lead under 2 minutes, scoring the go-ahead touchdown in perfect Iowa fashion. In fact, Iowa has led or been tied in the fourth quarter of all three of their losses this year. In the rivalry game in Ames, against Iowa State, in the two home games against Indiana and Oregon. In those two instances, Iowa had a lead in the fourth quarter against IU and against the Ducks. And ultimately, they come out on the losing end. Their three losses by a combined 10 points. It's almost disappointing in a way, because those are the games that Kirk Ferentz has so often won. When you win by the margins, when the little things are going to matter in a game that is incredibly tightly contested with not many points available out there, winning in the margins is KF. It's Iowa football for the last 3+ decades. They were unable to convert when it mattered. They'll have another opportunity against a ranked foe on the road in LA against USC. We'll talk about in just a little bit. 6.5-point spread in favor of the Trojans at home. I think Iowa might make some noise on Saturday, but third down honors go to the Ducks, who also love water. Oregon wins an instant classic Big Ten football game in November, 18-16 over Iowa. Fourth down honors to a historic night for the Huskers offense, as Nebraska beats UCLA in the Rose Bowl 28-21. Nebraska opened up this week as nearly a field goal underdog on the road against the Bruins. Why? Because of the injury to Dylan Raiola, and not feeling overly confident that true freshman quarterback TJ Lateef, after what we saw, 5 of 7 for 7 yards against SC at home in Memorial Stadium, albeit on the fly in a big spot, would be ready for this game. And that was my charge. Could the offensive line keep Nebraska and keep Lateef upright? Yeah, they didn't allow a single sack to a UCLA team that has the fewest sacks among power conference programs in the sport this year. Would Dana Holgorsen design a scheme that Lateef could take advantage of with a full week of preparation? The answer was a resounding yes. And when we say a historic night for the Huskers offense, it was first the true freshman quarterback in TJ Lateef that in his first career start, albeit on the road, the SoCal kid from Compton back home in Southern California, 13 of 15, 205 yards, 3 touchdown passes, 31 rushing yards as well. The first ever true freshman at the FBS level since at least 1995, when the full offensive stats are available. The first ever true freshman to have at least 200 passing yards in a game, 3+ passing touchdowns, a minimum of 15 attempts, with fewer than 2 incompletions or fewer, and at least 30 rushing yards. Lateef is the only guy to put together a game hitting each and every one of those qualifications. Minimum 15 attempts, 200 yards through the air, 3 passing touchdowns, 2 incompletions or fewer, at least 30 on the ground. That is what TJ Lateef did in his first career start. And that's the first ever true freshman to do it. And there have been true freshman quarterbacks, of course, that have started multiple games and full seasons. By my records and by what I could see, the first ever true freshman to do that in their road debut, in their first career start on the road since 2013 when Jameis Winston did so for Florida State. But it wasn't just Latif. It was everybody around him, and namely that's Emmett Johnson. If you want to bring a quarterback along that is making their first career start, make sure the guy right alongside him in the backfield can provide a comfortable and stable spark. Emmett Johnson did that and then some. 28 carries, 129 yards, a rushing touchdown, and then a guy that Dana Holgorsen has called college football's Christian McCaffrey had 3 grabs for 103 yards, explosive after explosive, and 2 receiving touchdowns. Emmett Johnson in this historic night for the Huskers offense, becoming the first Big Ten player ever since at least 1995 with a $125 on the ground, 100 receiving yards, a rushing touchdown, and at least 2 receiving scores in a single game. So historic nights in the history of FBS college football since at least 1995 when these numbers are fully available, and maybe well beyond that for TJ Latif and his first career start and the guy right alongside him in that Nebraska backfield in Emmett Johnson. Speaking of EJ, 1,431 all-purpose yards, the most in FBS college football now, 1,131 rushing yards, the second most in FBS college football. Only once in the 15 years now that Nebraska has played as a Big Ten member institution has a Nebraska player led the conference in rushing and all-purpose yards. It was the same guy in the same year, Amir Abdullah, back in 2013. I'm going to track the numbers. I don't think since the early 1980s has a Nebraska player led the country in all-purpose yards from the line of scrimmage. I think it was Mike Rozier. I'm going to check that, but I do believe that Emmett Johnson is on track to do something that no Nebraska player has done in more than 4 decades. That's how incredible he has been this year. Just the second win, by the way, for Nebraska, albeit against the UCLA team that is still well below 500, still trying to figure things out in the interim coaching staff. Just the second win in 10 November games for the Huskers under Matt Rule. A 7-3 record now through 10 games for the Huskers as they enter an open weekend, a bye week, the best start through 10 games since 2016. That's what Matt Rule has done and developed in this program. Still need to win the games against the best and against those ranked foes, but that was a really important result, I thought, in terms of a bounce-back nature for Nebraska on Saturday in Pasadena. Nico Yamaleava, by the way, fantastic for UCLA in the game, 191 yards, 2 touchdowns, 86 yards on the ground was UCLA's leading rusher, but the Bruins now have dropped 2 straight and dropped back down to 3 and 6. Not the result UCLA was working for in a game that basically ended up being a pick'em. And some interesting news around the Bruins, maybe foregoing on their contract, buying out their deal to the tune of $60 to $80 million to leave the Rose Bowl and next year play in downtown LA in SoFi Stadium in an NFL stadium that lacks juice even for the best NFL teams. Mind-boggling decision. Not sure it will be worth it. They're trying to target luxury seating and box suites, being the difference for why they can recoup some finances. Not the move that I would make. So that ends our 4 down honors. First down, Omar Cooper Jr., and one of the best catches that you will ever see to win a football game in the history of the Big Ten or this sport. He earns first down. Second down goes to Wisconsin and their punter, Sean West, for being the leading passer to knock off a ranked foe in the first Big Ten win for Luke Fickell, kind of reinforcing some of that confidence and the vote of confidence that was given to him by Chris McIntosh early in the week with an immediate upset victory as a double-digit dog in Camp Randall. First Big Ten win this year, first Big Ten win since October of a season ago. Third down honors to Ducks liking water in Oregon, battling in a sloppy and murky game, but playing Big Ten football in an instant classic, knocking off Iowa in Kinnick Stadium 18-16. And fourth down honors the Huskers' historic night offensively for both true freshman QB and his first career start on the road, the SoCal kid back in Southern California, TJ Latif, and what Emmett Johnson is doing this year for Nebraska as well. You could have thrown historic nights and outstanding individual efforts in that same category. That's where we go next. Outstanding individual efforts is how we finish out our post-game show and recap the final 3 games from this Big Ten weekend in Week 11. Ohio State cruises to a 34-10 win in West Lafayette behind a career day for Jeremiah Smith and the guy that is still the rightful Heisman frontrunner. Listen to me, Ohio State fans. The rightful Heisman frontrunner and favorite in Julian Sayin with yet another incredibly efficient game that has his name already in the record books in college football. 34-10, the victory for the Buckeyes in Ross-Ade. Purdue did score with 1:45 remaining to come through the back door and cover as a 30.5-point home underdog, or a 29.5-point home underdog, but the game was never really in doubt. Purdue did lead early. They had a 3-0 lead after a weird pick from Julian Sayin that was deflected or off the hands of a receiver. One of the few mistakes, even in the stat sheet, that Sayin has made all year long. I talked about a career day for Jeremiah Smith. 10 grabs, the most in his prolific Ohio State career, albeit just 2 seasons, 137 yards, third most during his time in Columbus, and a touchdown. 10 grabs, 137 yards, a receiving score against Purdue. That's 10 total receiving touchdowns this year for Jeremiah Smith. He is one of 6 players nationally with at least 10 receiving touchdowns in FBS college football this year. He has recorded at least 97 yards in 3 consecutive games, in combining his effort against Purdue and what he did the week prior against Penn State, 123 yards and 2 touchdowns. He is playing his best football in the most significant month of the regular season, getting Ohio State ready to be unblemished as well into that Big Ten championship game, or at least at a perfect 11-0 before they try to snap the 4-game losing skid on the road in Ann Arbor against Michigan. Now I mentioned Julian Sayin, his proficiency and his efficiency this year. 97 FBS quarterbacks at the end of 11 weeks have thrown the football at least 200 times. There is only one quarterback of those 97 that has a completion percentage at 73% or better. It's Julian Sayin. And his completion percentage is 80.9% after a 27 of 33 day for 303 yards and a touchdown against the Boilers. Yes, the interception as well, but 27 of 33, 6 incompletions. Julian Sayin is right here, right now, currently having the best and most efficient season we have seen in college football history. He has the best completion percentage in the history of FBS college football, even if that percentage takes a couple of hits in the points and he finishes at 78% or better. Julian Sayin will have the best completion percentage in the history of FBS college football. And oh, by the way, he's the quarterback for the number 1 team in the country in the reigning national champs. He should be the Heisman Trophy favorite at this moment, albeit in an incredibly tightly contested race against Fernando Mendoza. So the individual outstanding effort for both Jeremiah Smith in a career day with a career best 10 receptions, one of them for a touchdown, and Julian Sayin. Ohio State in cruise control, 31.5-point favorite this upcoming week when the Buckeyes are back at home in Columbus, hosting, why am I blanking on the name, UCLA. Then they will take on Rutgers, and then they will be on the road to vanquish those demons in the game, in the rivalry against the Maize and Blue to end out the regular season. Speaking of Rutgers, we talked about how crucial the game was for both the Terps and the Scarlet Knights in Piscataway on Saturday. If either of those 2 teams wanted to flirt with bowl eligibility, they needed to get that 5th win against the other on Saturday afternoon. The Knights got it in Piscataway, 35-20 against the Terps, behind the outstanding individual effort from Rutgers running back Antoine Raymond. 41 carries, 240 rushing yards, and a touchdown. It's the 3rd Big Ten game this year for Raymond with at least 116 yards on the ground. By the way, Aiken Kaliak-Manis had 4 passing touchdowns as well. The 240 rushing yards are the most for a Rutgers player in a conference game, thus a Big Ten game ever, most in a home game in Piscataway ever in Rutgers program history. And don't forget, the Scarlet Knights invented the sport of college football, or at least are the birthplace of college football. The 41 attempts on the ground, toting the rock for Antoine Raymond, tying the most in program history. Crucial win for Rutgers, who will end the year, as we shared, against Ohio State and against Penn State, but the game against the Nittany Lions so much more doable than we expected early in the season to try to get back to a bowl game under Greg Schiano. Maryland more than likely going to miss out on a bowl game. And under Mike Locksley, his 7th year as the head coach in College Park, this his 6th full season. We have talked about the tale of 2 seasons for the Terps, And it's doing the same exact thing here in 2025 to the point where I'm not sure Mike Locksley gets canned this year because of how crazy the coaching cycle is going to be, but it's not getting better. In fact, I think you can argue it's only getting worse. Maryland in the months of August and September, in those 6 full seasons under Locksley, are 21-5. That's outstanding. But in the months of October and November, perhaps more critical months in a college football season, they are now 10-33 following the loss on Saturday against Rutgers. They have never, that being Maryland, in the 6 full years under Locksley, had a winning record in the months of October and November under Mike Locksley. That's just not going to get it done. Doesn't matter how well you can recruit. Doesn't matter the talent that you accrue. Doesn't matter what the finances are like within your program. If you cannot win games in October and November in conference play in critical junctures, not even just to contend for Big Ten championships or an 8-9 win season, but to get to bowl eligibility, there's not much more that you can show in administration that you are deserving of being the head coach of a Big Ten football program. Outstanding individual efforts everywhere on Friday night in LA for USC as they thumped Northwestern 38-17. I thought the game had a chance to be a little bit closer. It was not. And part of that individual outstanding effort was one of the best receivers in the conference and in the country in Mekhi Lemon. 11 grabs, $161, and a touchdown. Also added a rushing score as well. Jaden Mayava got back on track, 299 yards after only 9 completions on 23 throws last Saturday in Lincoln against Nebraska. So he's a part of it. Mekhi Lemon is certainly a part of it. How about King Miller, the preferred walk-on freshman? 15 carries, 127 yards, and a touchdown against the Cats. That is 8.5 yards per carry. In one more wrinkle of the individual outstanding effort, Sam Heward, the backup quarterback, wearing 80, where he has been listed on the roster. That confused myself, the broadcast crew, and many around the sport of college football on Saturday as he checked in wearing the same number 80 that USC's punter Sam Johnson wears as well. And Heward threw an absolute dot on a 4th down conversion. Well, he's listed as number 80 on the roster with the quarterback designation. And because he went in the game wearing 80, the same as that as Sam Johnson, USC's punter, Northwestern didn't really have much of a clue. The Big Ten League office did release a statement on Sunday morning saying that should have been a penalty. Not Sam Heward in the fake punt for the completion, but then when USC's real punter, also wearing that same number of 80, Sam Johnson, checked into the game for the first time. Because, as they stated, you can't have 2 players wearing the same number doing the same thing, as in lining up for a punt. But we have players wearing the same numbers on opposite sides of the football, and you have players that even if they were wearing a weird number, if Sam Heward was the quarterback and they put him in Wildcat, it wouldn't be as though he can't be out on the outside because he's now a wide receiver if they have somebody wearing 80 either. It's an interesting distinction that I didn't really understand, but it would not have been a penalty on the fake punt, despite how Bush League or not you find it is. It would have or should have, as the Big Ten Conference office did say, be a penalty when USC's real punter, Sam Johnson, checked into the game for the first time. Regardless, I'm not sure it made much of a difference for the outcome, and it was a big win for USC. However, they did still allow Northwestern to rack up 5.2 yards per carry. So this upcoming weekend, as USC controls its fate to a college football playoff with games against Oregon, Iowa, and UCLA still on the docket, if you're going to win the big games, you got to have a big performance against a Hawkeyes team that I don't think is going to be down and out because of the disappointing result against Oregon on Saturday. I do think Iowa will be gunning for it. But that's week 12. That's next week. That's on the pregame show for next week on Big Ten Breakdown. This has been the postgame show on one of the best weekends of Big Ten football that I can remember, and I hope you all enjoyed it as such. This is Big Ten Breakdown. I'm Ben Stevens, and thanks to you as always for being here.